My name is Leanne Passaro. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really honored to be moderating this panel today. A bit about me, real quick. I grew up in New Jersey. I played elite club soccer growing up, and I continued to play at a top Division III school. And I now work as a high school English teacher and a coach. Why I'm here today is that I also serve as the Chief Operating Officer of the Opponent. We are a nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness for student athlete mental health and just advocating for a healthier sports culture overall. I'm here today with Dr. Cindy Chang, the Chief Medical Officer of the NWSL, and Dr. Mariah Bullock, the Clinical and Sports Psychologist for the OL Reign. Welcome, Mariah and Cindy. I guess we can start with Dr. Chang. Can you introduce yourself a bit more and just tell us more about how you got to where you are now and what brought you to taking the role of CMO at the NWSL?
So, Leanne, thank you. Mariah, it's nice to meet you. So as Leanne said, I am a physician. I have a medical degree, and it's been 30 years that I've been in sports medicine. So I'm family medicine trained, and then I did a fellowship in primary care sports medicine. And after receiving that training, I started at the Ohio State University, which was my alma mater, and I was on faculty there for a couple of years. And then I began to, kind of branch out and do other things. I really just thought I was going to be the team doctor, for my high school and go back to my hometown of Columbus and be a family doctor and take care of my community. And what ended up happening is my interest in sports led me to doing more event coverage. And I began to get involved with the United States Olympic Committee. I was doing covering events in sports at Ohio State University as a team doctor. And then I took the job as the head team physician at UC Berkeley, Go Bears, in Berkeley, California. And from then on, continue to do more and more in the field of primary care sports medicine. You talk about, like, over the last 30 years, I've been climbing, people talk about climbing the rungs, of a ladder. And, and sometimes you seem like what's the destination at the top, right? And sometimes the rungs are broken and you have to wait a little bit and you decide, what do I really want to do? What is my passion? And in the end, I've had some zigs and zags. And in the end, what led me to the, here's the things. First of all, I was a team CMO. CMO means Chief Medical Officer. It can also mean Chief Marketing Officer. I have a funny story about that. But I was the Chief Medical Officer for Team USA at the Paralympic Games in Beijing for the United States. And then following that, in 2012, I was the Team CMO for Team USA in London at the Olympic Games. And being a Chief Medical Officer was like being a head team physician. You're really trying to coordinate care, coordinate services, develop protocols, policies, and institute them. Make sure that they're instituted so that we protect player health, safety, well-being, and we have them be able to perform at their peak performance, right? And I was then asked to be the acting CMO in the WNBA, which is the WNBA, Women's National Basketball Association. That it was their first season during COVID in 2020. And I again served that role in an environment where there was really not very many resources and trying to do the best thing that you can with minimal resources. And then fortunately, the collective bargaining agreement was basically instituted between the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League, and the Players Association. And in that collective bargaining agreement, it said the league needs to hire a chief medical officer. And really, that's where I am now. That's how I got to where I am. The league said, okay, this is in the CBA. We realize this needs to be done as well. It's, we're in our 10th year. So I was hired in May of 2020 as the league's first chief medical officer to help guide the league and really help with guiding the league in terms of its policies, player health and safety and well-being. And so that's where I am.
That's amazing. And I hear so many amazing things in that story. I love the analogy of there's no real one linear path. I'll come back to a couple of thoughts there. But Dr. Bullock, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? You're a former NWSL player. You recently became the first sports psychologist for an NWSL club. Tell us how you got to where you are today.
For sure. Thanks, Leanne. Cindy, great to hear more about you. Earlier before the call, we were joking a little bit about our Bay Area rivalry, and I guess that's where I'll start my story, which is that I played at Stanford University, And there I studied psychology for undergrad, mostly just because I enjoyed the classes and they were interesting to me. And I was always kind of fascinated with people. And then my senior year, I took an introduction to counseling course where we learned a little bit more about like what it is to counsel, and we practice peer counseling. And that's where I was like, oh, this is really fun. And I think I'm okay at it. And that's when I kind of decided post my athletic career that that's something that I wanted to pursue. So got drafted to the NWSL for its inaugural year to the Boston Breakers. And it's so cool to see where the league has gone. That first year, I remember like the base salary was $6,000 in the season. And so it's just wild to see how things have changed. Got traded to Seattle Reign for my second and third years, where we won the Shield. And that was super cool and fun. And that's when I decided, you know, I'm ready to kind of move on to other adventures. And so received my PhD in clinical psychology. And at the time, there weren't any positions like I have now within sport, whether that's at a collegiate level or a professional level. And so the mentors that I spoke to kind of recommended be trained in mental health treatment and then have a subspecialty in sport performance if you want to be involved in sport. And so that was kind of the route that I took. I was primarily trained in mental health. And then as I progressed within my degree, started getting involved in the College Counseling Center, meeting with student athletes. I had a supervisor who was the university sports psychologist, and then started to receive more training in more of like the mental performance, mental skills realm. So post-graduation, my first job was at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where I'm still there part-time. And from there, how I got involved in the NWSL, I think is a pretty fun story. So I was obviously still a fan and would follow Seattle Reign, now OL Reign, watch their games, follow them on socials. And in 2020, in the Challenge Cup that was during COVID, Bethany Balcer had tweeted out to Twitter and was like, hey, you may have noticed that I had to come off of the field. That's because I was experiencing panic symptoms. And I quoted that tweet at OL Reign and at NWSL to be like, hey, everyone, when you're wanting to get sports psychologists involved in this league, like, you know where to find me, like mostly jokingly. And then the owners of OL Reign, who were also the owners when I was there, so Bill and Teresa Predmore, DM'd me and were like, hey, Mariah, are you serious about being involved? And I was like, yeah, if you're serious, I'm serious. Let's make it happen. So I think at the time there wasn't the CBA that was mandating mental health care. And so we were just kind of having conversations. How do you want this to look? What kind of care do we think is best? They wanted my perspective as an athlete, what I thought would be helpful for the players. And that's kind of how we created that position. Further, I also work part-time with Canada, the Canadian national women's soccer team. And how I got connected with them was one of my ex-teammates from Stanford played with the current Canadian head coach, played for the current Canadian head coach when she was with the England national team. They posted they had a position. My teammate forwarded me the listing, and I was like, this is amazing. And so it's just been a cool world of staying in soccer and exploring that, not corporate playground, but like women's soccer playground, and connecting with others and getting involved in ways that I've always dreamed of. And when I started my career, didn't know were possible.
Dr. Mariah, can you just add a little bit more context on the difference between a mental health professional and a mindset performance coach? This is something that we talk about at the Hidden Opponent all the time. And I think there's some general misconceptions around the difference, when I should go to one versus the other. And then Dr. Chang, feel free to hop in on that as well.
Yes, please do. Both of you hop in at any point. So a mental health practitioner is someone who needs to be licensed, who has had training specifically in dealing with mental health concerns. That could be diagnosable mental illness like depression, anxiety, trauma, substance use. It could also just be more like adjustment type concerns. So I'm moving to a new city and I'm a little bit stressed, or there's some like interpersonal conflict within my family or my partner or my social relationships. That's all kind of mental health practitioner. Mental performance coaches are more, so it gets kind of complicated. You'll hear different terms like sports psychologist, mental skills, mental performance. The term psychologist is usually protected as those who have a doctoral degree, and usually in counseling and clinical psychology. So that's more the mental health. So then separately, we have mental performance coaches who usually have more a track of a degree might be in sports psychology, which is confusing, or kinesiology, or something more that route. And those type of interventions and services are geared more towards the mental side of the game. So that could be performance anxiety, that could be confidence, that could be goal setting, that could be, and there's honestly, like, if it's a Venn diagram, there's definitely overlap, and that can get kind of messy. And so I think it's just about being really clear about what your training is in, what you're competent in, and what you're licensed to do.
That was great, Mariah. And I would say for those who are listening, also be confident and comfortable asking, the provider, what is your training in? And understanding the difference is really key, because there's a lot of, for example, there's a lot of doctors out there. When we see terms like Dr. Bullock, Dr. Chang, the question is, well, what are you a doctor of? Because you could be a doctor of dentistry, right? You could be a doctor of psychology, clinical psychology. You could be a doctor of physical therapy, but not every doctor is the same. So asking and having the confidence and, just to be able to say, well, what is your background in training? And because too many times we've seen where we've had patients and athletes go see a sports psychologist, and that sports psychologist is trying to manage their depression or trying to manage their anxiety, and they don't have the clinical background and training to do that, even eating disorders. And that can lead to really, really bad consequences if not under the care of a licensed mental health professional.
Let's shift gears a little bit to, what does a typical work day look like for each of you? Maybe one of your busiest days, which I'm sure there's many versions of that on different days, but either one of you kind of want to hop in on what a busy day might look like for you?
I can start real quickly. When I first got this position back in May, and I do want to say that the other thing that made me eager to take this role as a CMO is that my daughter played in the league for 2 seasons before she went overseas to play. And, so I was familiar with the NWSL, and I knew that there were things that could be improved in the league. And I wanted to help do that. And I do not have a soccer pedigree. In fact, I've never played in a soccer game. Soccer was not available to me in Ohio growing up. But that doesn't mean that you can't be involved in the sport. Right. I mean, so for those of you, again, who are listening, you don't need to have that background. It's certainly, it's helpful when you have a background, but certainly you don't need that to be able to follow your passion in this sport, no matter how you feel you want to contribute to it, whether or not it's in the marketing realm or the, or the sports medicine realm or the counseling realm. Okay. Understanding the athlete in that role. Back up. So I was juggling 2 jobs at the time I took that position, because certainly the league needed to make that hire and needed to make it quickly, right? Because the CBA kind of said we need to get that started before the season. And even then I was hired shortly after the season started. But I was juggling full-time, actually part-time. I had to reduce my time at UCSF. So my typical morning, if you're in academic medicine, is that my morning would start at 6:30 or 7:30 with a meeting, whether or not it's an administrative meeting or educational meeting. And then I'll just pick one day. I take care of the USL Roots team. So that morning I would drive over to their facility and hold a training room for them. And then I would, as a fellowship director, I would moderate a noon conference, which is an educational conference for our fellows and other primary care sports medicine docs. Then I would run the clinic, and I would have clinic from 1 to 5, where I would see kids of all ages and adults up to 90 plus years old, active adults with their sports medicine illnesses and injuries. And then I would jump on a call with US Rowing, because I'm on their scientific committee meeting. And then in the evening, I would do charting. I would do NWSL stuff. I would work on lectures or academic materials. And throughout the day, I'd be taking phone calls. like we have a positive COVID test on one of our teams in NWSL, but the test is a little bit funky and do we have to hold them, and what's the issue? And so I would be taking those phone calls in between. So certainly then, because of this dual role, because my CMO position is not full-time, it is a part-time contracted position, I decided to retire from my position at UCSF. So as of January of this year, I'm now retired from that role. I'm emeritus. Yeah, I'm going to hit the applause button because that is so important to me. Yeah. And what's happened since then, I've had a little bit more time to definitely more structured time to devote to doing things like this, honestly, to educate. I'm involved in legislation up in Sacramento. So I've been talking to assembly members, et cetera, about some legislation that we need to pass for sports safety. My role here, I'm on several foundations, and that's what I'm doing now. So my days are definitely more structured. I have a little bit more free time, and I think that that's important. As an aside, I was so busy that what did I sacrifice? I sacrificed my personal health, working out, and I sacrificed personal time, spending time with those around you, your loved ones around you, or people that you want to spend time with. And I love my job. I love what I do, but I realized that was unhealthy for me. So I made that change. I retired a little bit earlier than I thought I would from UCSF, but these are definitely passion projects now. And I'm really excited. That's what my day is like.
Absolutely. Thanks for, we're going to have to get you to start playing some pickup soccer or something. But also I love what you had to say about how many different fields you kind of touch, right? Legislation, education, business, medical. I think so often, especially young people, get kind of driven in one path, but the world is so interdisciplinary, right? We have to collaborate with people of all sorts. We have to get our hands in all different arenas. So I love that your day that you just gave us an example of had so many different fields involved. Dr. Bullock, how about you? What's a busy day look like? And I did not know that you were a former sort of OL Reign player, now working for your old club. That's awesome.
Yeah, love it. And an interesting part of it, now that you brought that up, was some of my teammates are still on the team, right?
No way. That's crazy.
It's an interesting ethical balance, which I think is common in sport, is that ethical boundaries are different than they are in other spaces, and especially in mental health or just healthcare in general. And so that's been fun and has transitioned my relationship with those people. But anyway, typical busy day. I don't know that I could go in order of a day because, as you know, in athletics, it's like changing all the time. So I'll more just give you the bits and pieces of what might happen in a day. So I'd say I probably have 3 to 4 individual sessions with athletes, and my sessions usually run like 45 minutes. So that could be either mental health or sport performance related. I'll usually go to practice. And when I'm at practice, I'm observing both players and staff. If I'm working with people individually, I might be looking at, okay, I know that I'm working with this person on their recovery after mistakes. So I'm saying, okay, after they make the mistake, are they doing these types of actions that we've talked about? And then I'm also looking at how coaches and players are interacting, team dynamics, team culture, energy management, and how just the energy of the team is looking. Also in a day, I'm doing a lot of consultation. So there's a lot of interdisciplinary work. So consulting with technical staff, with athletic medicine, with sports science, just in terms of whether there's specific individuals that we want to be collaborating on, or we just want to get other perspectives on how to address a team issue. I'll work with the coaching staff on maybe more long-term culture vision type work, or how they want to be delivering a message in a player meeting. I'll be at player meetings, whether that's reviewing film or talking about formation, game plan going into an opponent. And when I'm in that, I'm making sure that I'm aware of what it is. So when I'm meeting with individuals, I have context behind what they're talking about, and also so that I can have similar messaging as what the technical staff is, so that we're all on the same page. And then I'm also looking at how engaged the players are, their attention levels, whether they're grasping information, people who I know maybe like have a hard time speaking up, encouraging them. And then also in a busy day, I might do like a team performance session, either team performance or team culture. So with OL Ray in this preseason, I facilitated like a personality assessment of sorts. And then we use that to kind of debrief communication styles and how that's showing up on and off the field, how we can leverage the strengths of the different personality styles and what maybe differences we need and the drawbacks of those styles. So that's usually pretty fun for people too. So that's a day in there.
I have a quick question, and I think this is what's the challenging, the ethical boundaries, because you have the background and training as not only a licensed mental health professional, so that is a different realm of protected healthcare information, right? We call it PHI, and then you are a trained and certified to be a mental health and mental performance, right? Sports. And so how are you able to tell your clients and your players, listen, what you say, share with me in the morning, right? If I've seen you for some issues here, or even say coaching conflict, we'll just, there's coaching conflict issues creating performance anxiety and maybe some depression. You're working with an athlete in the morning, and in the afternoon, you're doing a lot of these interdisciplinary team building, and they are aware that you're talking to coaches and our applied sports scientists, et cetera, on the team about players, right? And interaction and team dynamics. How do you say to them, do not worry? And so they trust you on one end, they see you in another role.
Totally. That's a great question. And honestly, probably the most difficult part of my job, in my opinion. And I think confidentiality is so huge for me coming from a mental health background. And I know in teams that I've been a part of, there hasn't been as much of that confidentiality. So I came in and I was just very, very upfront, both with staff and players, of like, this is where I come from. I'm going to make sure that staff, you get information that you need that's helpful, and also trust me to come to you if there's something wrong. With the players, I wanted to make sure, hey, I'm going to treat, this is how I do it. It's not how you have to do it. I'm going to treat whatever you tell me when we're meeting individually, whether it's performance or mental health related, as confidential. For me to be able to do my job well, and this is kind of like in the consent process I get in our first meeting, I'll say, for me to be able to do my job well, it's helpful to loop in other people at times. And that's all from a collaboration standpoint. And to me, I think my personal practice leans more towards protecting the player. So I let them know, you know what, I'm not going to say anything, one, that you're not comfortable with first, and two, that I don't think is going to eventually help you towards whatever goals we're trying to achieve. So from the jump, I say, hey, is it okay if I just confirm that I'm seeing you? Because that takes care of a lot of the worries from the staff. If I can just say, hey, you know what, I'm meeting with them, we're working on it, great. And then let's say we're going through a session, we're talking about, a conflict with the coach. I'm thinking in my mind as we're going, hey, it would be really helpful if we got this person involved or this person involved. And then I'm having that conversation up front in the session with the player to say, you know what, I think it'd be really great if I not even brought into the session, but like, if I looped in with athletic medicine, because it sounds like they are missing this piece. Or honestly, what I do first is I try to empower the athlete to have that conversation with the other member, so then I don't have to break confidentiality. But then I let them know, hey, if you need me to advocate for you, or if you need an ally in this, or we need to do this together, I'm here to support. So condensed answer to your question is I'm up front and I front load to make sure that everyone knows the expectations. And then I'm very, very transparent in the moment and try to explain the rationale of, hey, this is where I think it'd be helpful to share. I might give them an example of what I share, which is usually just high level. Like I can just say, hey, you know what, goalkeeper coach, I think it would be best, I think you can best reach this athlete if you're giving a little bit more specific feedback in their footwork, something like that. And they're like, it's simple at the end of the day, but it's kind of complicated in the process. Did that answer?
Oh my God, I love that.
Okay.
Leanne, I have one last comment.
No, go ahead.
And again, to all of you listening, this is total teamwork. I mean, this is exactly how you want the team to work. And it's the same thing. If I'm seeing someone and I am protecting their confidentiality, but I know that if I can get them to someone like Dr. Bullock, that it'll be helpful. Or if they can let the coach know, because I know the coach as well. And then I try to empower them to say, how can you approach the coach about this? Or it's just, oh my God, that was a perfect answer. And it was a perfect example of how the integration of everyone on a team to help a player achieve their goals is so critical. But sometimes you have to lead that player to realize the importance of that.
Let's jump to a question about kind of barriers to entry. So obviously you're both women in the healthcare industry, you're both women in sports. Have you either of you faced any barriers in your career in relation to your identity? And maybe what did you do about it, or what can we do as a society to kind of address these barriers?
I think for me, in my experience personally, it's primarily, I would label it more as like microaggressions. I feel Cindy talked about the title of doctor, right? And I think as a woman and also being a non-conventional not a medical doctor, I see a lot of my colleagues, and in particular male colleagues, that will be referred to as doctor, and I'll be Mariah. And I prefer Mariah, honestly, but I think I would just like to be asked first, which we all did together, like before this call. Other things are if I'm in a mixed gender group and we're going to have some type of conversation, people may not think that I'm the one who's in charge, and they'll refer to a male colleague first, or introduce themselves to a male colleague first. Another difficulty is, which is just a layer on top of being a woman, is those who are mothers or are new mothers or are breastfeeding mothers. Like that is really hard to do in sport. I had a child 11 months ago and I would have no idea, which is why I don't necessarily blame people. Like if you haven't done it, you don't know. And then you're doing it and you're like, oh my gosh, how? How do we do this? It's like a natural barrier. And I think what we can be doing, as some people may have seen with like some of the US national team players or the Icelandic women's soccer player who had, I think a Tribune, or I can't remember which media source, but that article is just creating policies that can make it easier to be a mom, so that women in soccer and in sport can play as long as they can and want to, and just making that a little bit easier to do.
Well, I just want to pony up on the thing of motherhood. Congratulations, Mariah. But
Yes,
making
congrats.
that normal too. Like I would pump at lunchtime because but that's when I took my phone calls. But you could hear the sound in the background, right? And it's people go, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just pumping." But it's just like and if people were really truly uncomfortable, they would never call me at noon. But then they'd never get their questions answered. So it was kind of up to them what they wanted to do. But that was the way it was. Now, honestly, you should take that space. You should take that space away and feel like you have that time. But back then, that's what I had to do in my office because there was really no space otherwise to do it.
And then the last thing I would add as a woman, gosh, I was like, oh, not really that many things that I'm just talking more things, is I think that in particular, mental health care can be seen as soft within sport. And so especially with male staff or in male sports, they already think that I'm just trying to be really like nice and get everyone off the hook and just validate excuses. Like being a woman on top of that, then I think I'm perceived as like not trying to build mental toughness and grit and high performance, which I am, but there's that kind of like bias and undertone that I think sometimes undermines our work.
Yeah, absolutely.
My soapbox now.
Oh God, can I climb onto your soapbox and just keep going? I would say this. Someone said to me, "You're mothering the athletes." And what I was doing was really addressing all of their needs, not just physical needs, but mental health needs. And that's not something that a lot of physicians sometimes do in the sports world. you never heard anyone say to one of my male colleagues, you're fathering, right? You're fathering the athletes. So there is the microaggressions, those comments that came. When I first started 30 years ago, I faced sexism. There are many, many coaches had never seen a female team doctor. I faced racism. Obviously, I'm a person of color. So as Mariah is, it's like they never even had an Asian physician, much less a team physician. Ageism, when I entered into my job as the head team physician at Cal, I was in my early 30s, right? And we had coaches that were well into their 60s, and they were like, you're too young to know what you're doing. And I also faced something like what Mariah said, trainingism. I mean, it was like everyone thought I was an ortho. You're sports doc, or you're an ortho, you're not an ortho. And I had to explain, I still have to explain over and over again what my training is, right? I'm primary care sports medicine. And there was an elitism too, honestly. It was where I ended up at UC Berkeley, people, Cal, Stanford, they're the Ivy League of the West Coast, et cetera. And they'd say, oh, where did you go to school? Thinking I was going to say Cal or Stanford or an Ivy League school. And it was like, I went to Ohio State. And they're like, well, what do you know? Right. And I'm like, dude, anyway, what do we do for that? Right. And I think that the tools are this. I would say my recommendation is ask head on, if a comment is made that you are wondering about, or you think, wow, that is a little bit out of line, go ahead and approach it head on and say, well, why did you say it like that? Or I don't understand what you mean by that comment. And I'll give you an example. I was interviewing for the CMO job at a major league several years ago in 2016. And I met with all male senior vice presidents. Okay, I had 6 meetings, boom, all day. And the last one was with the senior VP over HR. And I said to him, because I was wondering, I said, he made a little comment, they're like, we want to get more people interested in our league and et cetera, and especially women. And I said, well, do you have any women in executive roles at this league? You're talking about, getting more women leadership, et cetera. And he went, and he started to stumble a little bit. And he said, well, why do you ask? And I said, well, you're talking about all these things and you want me to get, you're looking at a CMO. I honestly already knew that I was probably getting interviewed because I was a woman and a person of color. So I checked off 2 boxes. But, he said, why do you ask? And I said, I just wonder why, because of these reasons. And he said, he goes, I'm not sure. And he started trying to name some people. And then he goes, well, what percentage do you think is good? And I went, well, I'm not quite sure. It'd be great if it were 50%, and now I've kind of followed that league, and they have been hiring senior VPs that are women and women and of color, people of color as well, which is great. So I would just say that there's a respectful way to reply to people or to address people who you feel treat you not respectfully or diminish your role or undervalue what you're doing, and to start to have that conversation. Because if you don't, it's going to boil within you, right? And that's just one suggestion I would make after having 30 years of comments and microaggressions thrown my way.
So for anyone who kind of was listening to that, maybe just take a look at, the career you want, the company, look at the school program that you want, and take a look, like, what does their leadership look like? Do you see yourself reflected in that, right? I think that's a huge step, and it's hard to be the only in a room, but also we do need some of those trailblazers. So, and it also goes back to taking care of yourself, right? Knowing how to take care of yourself when you are facing X, Y, or Z barriers, or when you are facing those microaggressions. How do you find the space to ensure you're doing okay so you can keep doing that worthy work? 2 kind of fun questions to end the day to either of you, but specifically to Mariah. Did you happen to watch season 2 of Ted Lasso? Question.
Yes, I have.
Great. They brought in the sports psychologist for the team. What do you think about that? Just curious.
That is a fun question. In general, I would say I despise the portrayal of psychologists in 90% of media.
Right.
But the one in Ted Lasso, I would put her in like my my like top third tier of media psychologists. Yeah, I think it makes it seem a little bit more approachable. I think she's still like a little bit colder and more like formal than I present. Not to say that's the right way to do it. Everyone does it their own way. But I just love that she was a part of the cast. So, and she was a woman of color. So I was like, go you. No notes.
Cool. Yeah. No notes on that. And I love that she kind of broke down Ted's fear, so to speak, of therapy, or fear of speaking about his feelings. I thought that was awesome too. If you could have any job other than the job you already have, what would you be and why? For me, I can throw one out there. For me, I would love to be like a sports documentary filmmaker right now. That's like my thought in my head, but like it could change tomorrow. But I love storytelling, and obviously I love sports, so that was one that I always go to.
Well, that's a great question. I do a lot of different interdisciplinary things. Writing is a really, I actually, God, Leanne, I don't know, because, on my bucket list is I want to get some legislation passed. And someone always said, do you want to run for office? We need more women in office. And part of me is like, I call out people for being ill-behaved, and I'm not quite sure I could survive right in politics right now, because there is, okay, so that's number one. Number two, I want to write a book. I think that I love the idea of writing down some of my experiences and the growth from that, and maybe how to influence some other people, being in my position where I was. And number three, I've an educator. Early on in medicine, I was so busy, right? Every third night call. And I realized that a lot of what I do in medicine is educate my patients. And I thought, I've always loved to teach. And, if this medicine thing doesn't work out for me, I can go into the classroom and be a teacher. So an educator of some sorts but more on a national platform to really influence people, and get them to, anyway, influence people. So don't know. I love what I do.
Great.
I love what I do, and I'm doing a lot of it. So I can't say that I would change my career right now.
I love it.
Cool.
Dr. Bullock,
I would co-sign you on any of those things, Cindy.
Yeah, same. I'll read the book.
For me, I also love what I do. Like, I wouldn't change it. I'm living my dream right now, which is amazing. I think one, like I like to read, and a book I read recently is called The Midnight Library, and it lets you like kind of jump into your life at different inflection points and be like, what would my life look like if I would have kept doing that, or if I would have done this other thing. And so for me, I always think about what life would look like if I would have kept playing. Like I had the capabilities to, and just decided to pivot, and would just be curious of what that would look like. And then my completely far-fetched dream job would to be a backup dancer for like a female hip hop artist.
I love that.
I don't want to be like in the spotlight, but I just want to be doing my thing in the background.